Brossard with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. China is stepping up military activity around Taiwan just a month ahead of Taiwan's upcoming elections. Hamiao Khan has this update.
A report from Reuters is revealing that Taiwan's military had to fend off at least 4 attempts from China as it approached Taiwan's contiguous zone. Now that's 24 nautical miles from its coast. Unnamed officials told Reuters that it's part of a larger campaign by Beijing to try and sway voters ahead of the elections in January. Officials here in Taiwan say that those 4 attempts included a combination of weather balloons, fighter jets, and other commercial ships coming close to the country last month in an effort to intimidate voters. TaiwanPlus reached out to the Defense Ministry for a comment, but did not receive a response by the time of air. China claims Taiwan is part of its own and regularly operates military aircraft and warships around the country. But officials here are concerned that that activity is going to increase ahead of the elections on January 13th. Beijing says that when Taiwanese voters go to the polls, they're not just picking a candidate, they're picking between war and peace. But Taiwan says that China should respect its election process and will not be deterred. Eason Ten and Hamiao Khan in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan citizens are going to the polls in just over a month, but when the country's indigenous people cast their votes, their ballots will look different from others. Rick Lauert has more.
Legislative candidate Savangan travelled nearly 400 kilometres from her home in Taiwan's capital, Taipei, to canvass for votes in this village in the country's rural south. She's running for one of 6 special seats in the legislature reserved for the country's indigenous people.
当然啦，尤其是我这次是年轻的无党参选人，所以你要跑全国的那个选区的范围啊，跟那个就我们的选区跟总统的选区一样大。
Like the rest of Taiwan's 600,000 indigenous population, Savangan cannot run as or vote for a representative of the constituency she lives in. Only in this parallel election for 6 of the legislature's 113 seats.
Reserved indigenous seats were introduced into Taiwan's legislature decades ago as a largely symbolic acknowledgement of the country's often marginalised minority. Now, many within the community say it hasn't given them a greater voice in national politics.
Unlike the majority of legislators who represent a geographic district, Indigenous legislators act on behalf of voters spanning the length of the country. But Indigenous communities say the system sidelines local issues, problems like unemployment and access to healthcare, which disproportionately affect the Indigenous population.
所以形成感觉好像，有的时候会感觉不是很完美、很完整。
我会觉得分区会比较好啊，因为如果我住在南部，我当然希望更多的资源都跟我有关系。
It's also an issue of identity. Indigenous voters are divided into highland and lowland people. It's a categorization introduced by the Japanese when they ruled Taiwan for 50 years up to 1945. But this does not reflect the country's 16 officially recognized indigenous groups that each have their own language and culture.
因为人是会移动的，从前住在山地乡的原住民呢，也会到都会地区来工作生活。那住在都会地区的原住民呢，也有可能回到自己的部落跟家乡，然后再加上婚姻啊、嫁娶啊，搬来搬去。所以这一套所谓的山地原住民跟平地原住民的这个制度呢，已经跟当时设计的时候的概念跟理想状况呢是不一样的。
A young and enthusiastic democracy, Taiwan has one of the highest voter turnouts in the world. But indigenous candidates like Savangan feel they are contending with an outdated and imperfect system as they struggle to increase their voice in national politics. John Su and Rick Lauert for TaiwanPlus.
China says it has arrested a Taiwanese writer for his work. Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office says Liao Mengyan is being investigated for selling obscene material. Liao is known for his adult fantasy novels. He was based in China, and his family have not heard from him in over a year. Ties between China and Vietnam are set to get warmer. The countries have announced 37 deals covering diplomatic relations and infrastructure. They were revealed during a state visit to Hanoi by Chinese President Xi Jinping. That visit comes just 3 months after Vietnam strengthened ties with the US and Japan. China and Vietnam have closely linked economies, but they also have a history of conflict with competing claims in the South China Sea. For more on what the visit means, our reporter Louise Watt spoke to Hun Thuc Sang, a lecturer at the University of Social Sciences and Humanities in Vietnam.
There's a lot of historical animosity between China and Vietnam, and they have disputes over the South China Sea. Why do they want to elevate their ties now?
I think China is trying to seek Vietnam reassurance that the Southeast Asian country and its neighbors, really close neighbors, is not taking sides with any great powers, including the United States and its allies against China. And on its side, I think Vietnam is trying to appease China's concerns.
Vietnam earlier this year elevated its ties with the United States. Is it now closer to Washington or Beijing?
Vietnam is trying to balance amongst great powers, and we can denounce the strategy of hedging, trying to reap the benefits from both sides. So I think Vietnam is doing really well, because at this year we can see that at first we have a Joe Biden visit to Vietnam, and second we have a Chinese President Xi Jinping visit, and there has been many speculation that Vietnam may elevate ties with Australia next year to the same level as it has with the United States and China. So I think it's kind of a really successful policy of Vietnam, and it denotes Vietnam diplomatic statecraft amongst great power politics.
The US and China are both trying to increase their influence with Vietnam. Why is Vietnam important to them?
Vietnam can be considered as the focal point of Southeast Asia. If China wants to move southward, it has to encounter Vietnam in the South China Sea. And for China, if it has the intention of becoming a superpower, this is really kind of doubtful whether China has already sea power, because China has not dominated the South China Sea. And it's really important that China wants to keep Vietnam within its reach. And for the United States, if the United States can have Vietnam within its arms, and in doing so, it can have a kind of really comprehensive security alliance structure in the region to counterbalance against the influence of China.
That was Hun Thuc Sang from Vietnam's University of Social Sciences and Humanities speaking to Louise Watt. The United Nations is demanding an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. It comes as the death toll from Israel's offensive there continues to climb. Gaza's health ministry says the violence has killed more than 18,000 Palestinians and displaced 85% of the enclave's population. The war started after Hamas raided Israel in early October, killing 1,200 people. Israel and the United States voted against the UN ceasefire. They say it would only help Hamas militants. Hong Kong actor Kathy Chow has died from an undisclosed illness. Chow was most active during the 1980s and 90s when she starred in several TV series in Hong Kong and Taiwan. She's best known for her role in The Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber, a martial arts TV drama based on a classic novel. Chow was 57 years old. The final members of K-pop supergroup BTS have started their mandatory military service. It's left millions of fans in mourning. Tiffany Wong reports.
Sporting military buzz cuts, the final 4 members of the 7-member supergroup BTS began their conscription in the South Korean military earlier this week, joining 3 other members in the country's mandatory military service. Fans waited to catch a last glimpse of group leader RM and vocalists V, Jimin, and Jungkook outside training centers. BTS fans, also known as ARMY, say they'll miss the group, but are lucky to have their 10-year catalog of music to comfort them for the next 2 years.
좀 울컥하기도 하고 우울하기도 하고 그래서 나오지 말까도 생각했었는데 이제 나와서 아침에 생각을 해보니까 좀 더 글 남겨놓은 거 보고 제가 더 힘내서 열심히 기다려야 되겠다.
In the meantime, we'll just keep watching their content, and I mean, right now, I'm in Seoul, I'm in Korea, which I didn't think would happen. So yeah, no, just all the love and support to them.
Eldest member Jin was the first to enter the military in December last year, with rappers J-Hope and Suga joining earlier this year. Under South Korean law, all men between the ages of 18 to 28 must serve an 18-month military service to supplement its defenses against North Korea, which the country is still technically at war with.
Army, we love you!
The group will reunite in 2025. Until then, fans will have their fellow army for support as they wait for their boys to return. Andy She and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
And as BTS fans wave goodbye to their idols, a new generation of young people is saying hello to a sleepy Korean island. John Van Trieste has this report.
A group of young people run with purpose across a sandy beach. They've come here to train, far from the distractions of home. If all goes to plan, the names stitched on their jerseys will one day be known across the country, and maybe even the world. This is Dook Island, a tiny speck of South Korea in the Yellow Sea. Though just a few hours from the bright lights of Seoul, life here is far from fast-paced. Since the 1950s, the population's plummeted to just under 2,000 people. But things are changing, thanks to elite baseball manager Kim Hak-young. His plan is to turn the island, already used for spring training camps, into an incubator for Korea's next baseball champions. Promising student athletes from around the country enroll in the island's high school, where they're turned into pros. At the program's launch last year, 28 student athletes signed up. This year, 13 new teammates joined them. The school, once on the brink of closing, is now a lively place. For the An brothers, aged 16 and 17, it's been quite a journey from their hometown, 400 kilometers away. But it's one they say has been worthwhile.
아무것도 없어가지고 할 수 있는 게 진짜 운동장이랑 거기에 공도 있고 해가지고 할 수 있는 게 진짜 야구뿐이어가지고 그냥 심심하면 야구하고 뭐 그런 걸로 할 수 있어서 그런 목표에 갈 수 있을 것 같아요. 기회도 많이 준다 해서 형이랑 같이 왔는데 여기서 열심히 하면 주전으로 써주기도 하니까 그래서 더 열심히 하고 있는 것 같고 여기서 나중에 또 잘하면 프로 선수도 되고 네, 잘할 수 있으니까 좋은 것 같습니다 여기.
Baseball is big business in Korea. The Pro League has 10 teams, and this year alone, their games have drawn more than 8 million fans. With good coaching and grueling training, the program promises to put Dook Island on the map as the birthplace of stars. It's taken a while for some locals to warm up to the idea, though. Much of the funding for the program comes from islanders' money, earned from sand dredged offshore that goes to construction sites in Seoul.
육지에서 있는 애들을 데려다가 우리 돈을 주냐. 그 나이 드신 분들이 그런 얘기를 하시죠. 그 이해를 못 하시고 우리 같은 사람들은 이제 그렇게 좀 전에 서두에 얘기했듯이 학교를 존립하고 독촉대 이런 발전 이런 거를 위해서 야구부 애들을 데려서 학교 폐교를 방지하고 존립하기 위해서 했지만은.
But with time, many, like this 82-year-old, have been won over.
우리도 애들이 여기 와서 있는 거 좋아요. 그리고 점점 많이 들어오면 더 좋고. 근데 애들이 자꾸 지운다 그러니까 그게 걱정이 되는 거죠.
The teams become the pride of this tiny island, and an example of how to revive South Korea's many small communities as the country's population ages. Devin Tsai and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for joining us on What's Up Taiwan. Visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, leave you with this footage of the Kyoto Tachibana Senior High School Marching Band performing in a shopping district in Taipei. I'm Philip Brossard, take care, and we'll see you next time.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, be sure to check out our website at TaiwanPlus.com. Good shot.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.